Ever since the 2005 PlayStation 3 tech demo of Final Fantasy VII was shown, fans have been clamoring for a visual update to the beloved PlayStation 1 classic. Fans of the series were rewarded with their patience in 2015 when the first footage of the remake was shown at E3, and after 5 long years of radio silence and development, all that's left is to enjoy our trip down Midgar once again. The first thing that players will notice about the Final Fantasy VII Remake is the scope of the game. Midgard is huge, with many areas including the Sector 7 slums having been greatly expanded. To get a scope of how big the world is, all a player would have to do is look up, and they truly get the sense of wonder of how big this world is. Square has stated that they wanted the first part of the multi-part remake to take place exclusively in Midgard, and many wondered how they would or even could expand what was a 5-hour section of the first disc into its own game, and they succeeded pretty well expanding areas that were only small sections into larger hub worlds. Players could see more of Midgard than they had ever seen in the original Final Fantasy VII. Gameplay-wise, Final Fantasy VII Remake is an action RPG, with players moving around, issuing commands, and earning experience from defeating enemies and bosses. Within the battle HUD, there's an ATB bar, which allows players to perform actions, such as using items, commands, special moves, or spells, and each action costs a bar with 2 bars maximum. Players can also command their partners on what actions to take, or even take over as one of the 3 party members freely. There are 3 modes to choose from: Classic, Easy, and Normal, with the Hard mode being unlocked after you complete the game's main story. Easy mode is made for players who wish to enjoy the journey and story, whereas Normal is a more action-oriented mode. Classic eliminates the need for players to move around in battle, as the game does it automatically, and players can just command their characters to what action to perform, akin to the classic gameplay of Final Fantasy VII. Materia makes its return as well, working the same way as it did in the original, leveling up with AP and granting you new spells with each level up. Players can also take on optional side quests in certain chapters of the game to either gain new materia or to learn more about characters' past. The story of the Final Fantasy VII Remake follows the originals closely, for the most part. Because of the game taking place in Midgard exclusively, more time is allowed to flesh out the characters. Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, for example, are allowed to become actual characters in this game, as you interact with them way more than you ever did in the original. You learn more about their backstory and why they're fighting against Shinra. As stated earlier, the story follows the same beats as the original. For those experiencing it for the first time, you play as Cloud Strife, a former soldier turned mercenary who's hired by Barrett Wallace to blow up a Mako core reactor. Barrett believes that the reactors are sucking up the natural energy of the planet, slowly killing it. A one-time job eventually turns into multiple, as Cloud continues to reluctantly help out the group. Joining in the adventures is Tifa, Cloud's childhood friend and owner of the Seventh Heaven Bar that serves as Avalanche's hideout, and Aerith Gainsborough, a flower girl whose family genes are of great interest to the Shinra Electric Company. While the game does give you every opportunity to play as the main 4 characters, many of the game's best interactions occur between Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa, as the chemistry that the voice actors share is undeniable.
Got an idea! 7-7 happen, hoo-ah! 7-7 happen, hoo-ah!
Hell no.
Credit goes to the voice actors taking over roles that had been defined for almost 2 decades and transformed them into their own. There are plenty of alterations to the story that even if you grew up playing the original multiple times over, you'll still be surprised by the events that transpire in the remake. Visually, the game is impressive. You really get a scope of the ambition that Square had put into the project. Along with the massive world, some of the smaller details stand out, such as the game's weapon and equipment reflecting the current materia you have equipped. The score for the game is fantastic. The game constantly chooses the right music during encounters, and many of the remix songs rival their original composition, such as the boss battle theme and various renditions of Aerith's main theme. The game does have a few flaws, the most prominent being the camera angle during battles. While it works fine for the most part, the camera can be a hassle to control and can lead to you changing your intended target for an attack to someone else or getting stuck in a wall against an enemy. Though many of the story additions have added some depth to the characters, there are some that feel like filler and can really sour the mood. As you can be engaged in an action event in one moment and then switch to a search quest immediately afterwards, though in the long run this hardly ruins the overall experience. Many longtime fans may also be put off by some of the changes done to the game's story. Final Fantasy VII Remake may be Square Enix's most ambitious title of all time. The scale of the game shows that Square really wanted to nail this project down correctly, and so far they have. The combat is fun and addictive, the main characters retain their charm and have even more depth added to them. While there are some annoyances, the pros far outweigh the cons. This is a must-have for not only any Final Fantasy fan, but any fan of RPGs. Final Fantasy VII Remake will no doubt have the same effect on your fans as the original did for us over 20 years ago. It is a modern classic.
I don't think anyone saw this coming!